First and foremost, Alhamdulillah, 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 we thank Allah to hear the good news that the preliminary ceasefire has been enacted. So Alhamdulillah, we are so grateful to Allah that inshaAllah ta'ala we hope this is the final inshaAllah peace that is needed. And Allah knows the future, but at least status quo is better than what we have seen. So we hope inshaAllah ta'ala that this is the precursor to much good inshaAllah ta'ala. And because it was going to be the 2-year anniversary today anyway, I thought that it would be appropriate about a topic related to a figure, a very seminal figure with the history of Palestine, and in particular, one of the advocates of a free Palestine, and one of the people who saw the changes that happened 100 years ago, and that is none other than Al-Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the last Grand Mufti of Masjid Al-Aqsa and of Jerusalem. He was a person who lived through the very troubling times of the rise of European Zionism and of the establishment of the apartheid state of Israel. And he was imprisoned and he was sent into exile. Unfortunately, the Zionist lobby has lied about him in a very evil manner. And one of the reasons I'm having this lecture is to talk about those awkward lies, because there are pictures that are undeniable, and those pictures show him meeting Adolf Hitler. And so the lie that the Zionist lobby has said is that he was a Nazi, a'udhu billah. And even worse than this, I'm going to save this for later on, but unbelievable the slanders that they do to this man. So we have to clear up and give the history of this person in a summary. And Amin al-Husseini, he was born in Jerusalem to a family that has hundreds of years of lineage in Jerusalem. And al-Husseini means he is from Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. He is a Sayyid. His lineage goes back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And his family was known for scholarship, for ulama, for being of the nobility of the city. His father was the Mufti in the 1900s, in the late 1800s, sorry. And he passed away in 1908. So until he passed away, his father was the Mufti. So he is coming from a line and lineage of scholars, of ulama, and he was born in the year 1895, and he grew up in a very educated environment because his family is so well connected, because his family is nobility. He went through multiple different schools, the French school, the European school, the British school, and the madrasa. He went through different phases so that he gets a very broad exposure. He memorized the Qur'an in Al-Aqsa, and when he was a young teenager, I think 16, 17 years old, his father says, now you have to go to Egypt and study at Al-Azhar. So he was sent as a young teenager, he was sent all alone to go study in Al-Azhar and also in University of Cairo. And there he got in touch with and was mesmerized by the icon of the earlier part of the 20th century, the great mujaddid in my estimation of that time, and that is who? That is who in Egypt? Rashid Rida. Rashid Rida. Rashid Rida is another lecture. I have to give many lectures about him one day. Once again, a name that is greatly misunderstood. And there's a lot of slanders about him. He's a Freemason, he's instant. I guarantee you, anybody who says that has never read a book of Rashid Rida. I guarantee you, Rashid Rida, you can see so much good coming out of this one man. So many movements around the world are inspired by this man. Diverse groups of people are all inspired by this man because he wanted, and he was the first person, I mean Afghani before him, but he made it global, to warn the ummah of the impending calamity of the collapse of the Islamic Caliphate, to warn the ummah of what's going to happen if they don't stand up to colonization. He was one of the most active people. And unfortunately, he lived at a very difficult time. He has a whole series of treatises. I'm going into a tangent here, sorry guys, but it's so. I really admire Rashid Rida. I view him, frankly, as somebody that inspires me. And that causes my critics to also go into their tangents because they don't like Rashid Rida, so they say I'm also following somebody they don't like. But anyway, it is what it is. You read by your own. Don't just listen to people's verdicts without doing your own judgment. Don't be just like, if somebody says it. No, do your research. Read what Rashid Rida has written. He was a very erudite, educated scholar, and he was well educated in East and West traditions. And those groups that don't appreciate the Western tradition at all, they found him to be problematic because he's not speaking like them. He's not saying, he's one of the first people to tell the ulama, guys, get your act together. There's bigger problems than what you're talking in your halaqat. There's colonization happening, right? Come together and do something for the community. And you hear this message from me as well. Islam is not just about halaqat and durus. Islam is about bettering society. Of what benefit is your halaqat if the French are going to rule over you, if the English are going to take your power away? And so he is critiquing the scholarship in this regard. So obviously when you have Amin al-Husseini studying with him, what's going to happen? Amin al-Husseini now becomes inspired as well. And he begins to see, my country will no longer be a country, which he was correct in assessing, right? He was one of the first people to see this. This is, 1912, 1913. He sees, this is so, there is no Israel right now, right? It's pure Palestine. But the immigration has begun. And the European Zionist Federation is sponsoring people, paying them money, go and buy the land, or do something, bribery, or go and get rid of. So already you have mass immigration happening in his land. In his lifetime, he sees the Jewish population go from 3% to 35%. In his lifetime, he sees this. In his lifetime, can you imagine? 1 out of 30 people becomes 1 out of 3. By hook or through crook, this is all going to be happening. People are bribing or force or maneuvering or whatnot. So he sees this impending doom. World War I breaks out and he's studying in Cairo. He goes, no, I need to leave my studies. I need to defend. But who am I to defend? I need to learn how to defend. So he travels to Istanbul. Why? To enroll in the elite military academy of the Ottoman Khilafah, because there's still a Khilafah then. This is what you call somebody who understands. I need to do something. Of what use is studying just ilm without, when my people are going to be massacred? World War I, what if they march in? And they marched in. What if, they all take over? And they took over. So he's a man of action. So he went to Istanbul. He left his studies and he went to Istanbul and he graduated from the military academy, the most elite military academy that the Khilafah had. He graduated from there. In this time frame, before this time frame, he also went on Hajj, and in this time frame it was rare to go on Hajj, and so he was always called Al-Hajj Amin al-Husseini, because he went on Hajj as well with his mother, by the way. So this was before World War I. So when the World War I finishes, he then returns to Palestine and begins educating the people that this British mandate is a disaster and tragedy. We have to make sure that it doesn't get worse than this. We have to make sure they do not create an enclave for the European Zionists. And in this time frame as well, his father already passed away. He had another relative that became the Mufti, and that he also passed away. And so he was then chosen to become the Mufti in 1921. He becomes the Mufti of Quds and Masjid Al-Aqsa. And one of the first things he does is he forms a Supreme Muslim Council. The goal of this council, all of the Muslim organizations want to come together. Right? This is Rashid Rida's vision of unity, which, as you know, sectarian-minded people don't like. Because sectarian-minded people, they say, no, you must think like me, talk like me, walk like me, or else you are dal, mudil, kafir, fasiq. And Rashid Rida's like, guys, put these differences aside, talk about them in other places. We have the British coming, we have the French coming, we have Napoleon invading, right? This is Rashid Rida's mentality, which is changing the minds of sectarianism. And we find this in Amin al-Husseini as well. So one of the first things he does is he forms the Supreme Muslim Council, SMC. And the goal of this was to bring a consolidated effort of all of the madrasas, all of the higher education, all of the Sharia courts, all of the awqaf. We should have a government in spite of the fact there is no government, right? We should come together to show strength, even though the British are ruling, because by this time the British have the mandate. So technically the British are in charge of Palestine. And in this time frame, he begins giving khutbahs and durus, lectures, left and right, constantly, telling the Muslims that there is an impending doom and threat. You need to do something. You see in front of you, your lands are being taken. You see in front of you, the migration taking place. And of course, he's telling them you cannot sell. So in this time frame, the main tactic, and this we have to acknowledge this, that unfortunately, the main tactic was buying the Muslim land for very high prices, right? And these are Muslim farmers, peasants. If you're offered 10 times the price, because who's financing it? The Zionist Federation of Europe, right? Who's financing it? The money is coming from France, from Switzerland, from England. And of course, you have, we don't blame them, even though we do, but you get my point here. I don't blame it individually. But I mean, what do you want? A land might be worth, let's just say, 10,000. You're being offered 150,000. Just say, for example, right? It's too good to refuse. So this is still 1920s. And by the 1940s, they don't care about money. They're going to be using violence, right? But in the beginning, it was just surplus money. So Al-Amin Husseini is telling them, fear Allah. It is haram to sell to people that you know are going to be taking over. So he's one of the people that is warning of the impending doom. And in the process, so at this time, the British are controlling, and already a number of riots have happened, multiple riots. The British were very flustered. They didn't know what to do because they're the ones telling the European Zionists to come in. But then, as I said, in one generation, in 20 years, from 1 out of 30 to 1 out of 3, imagine the culture shock, imagine the arrogance, imagine. So already you have the beginnings of the clashes under the British. One of the reasons why the British threw in the towel and said, Khalas, United Nations, you take it, is because they didn't know how to solve the problem they created. They still don't know how to solve the problem they created. So Husseini, our guy, Al-Hajj al-Husseini, became basically the intellectual leader of the Muslims of Al-Aqsa, of Jerusalem. He is the spokesperson. He is the person that is looked up to. And in one particular occasion, there was a large Muslim festival happening, and the Zionists, they were traveling to the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, and they were already trying their best at this time to physically acquire that land, to say this is our temple. And when they would go, so before the Zionists got involved, everybody lived in peace. There was no problem with Jews coming and worshiping, and Al-Hajj Amin himself studied with Jewish teachers as a child. There's no question he's not an anti-Semite. The Jews that were living there in Arab lands, the Sephardic Jews, there's never been a problem. They lived peacefully. The problem was the Europeans that came and thought that the whole land is ours. We don't want to live in peace with you. So when this group came, they began, being accosting, just being vicious, a mob mentality, and they would go to the Wailing Wall like they do now. And now, of course, they own it or they control it. They would go there in large groups and pretend as if it is theirs. Just be arrogant, push, shove, whatnot. So in one occasion, Al-Hajj Amin, there was a large festival, there was hundreds of thousands of Muslims, and he gave a very, very passionate lecture that you need to defend this particular space. This is Masjid Al-Aqsa. You cannot let anything happen here. And it so happened within a few hours or maybe the next day, there was a massive, mob melee between the Muslims, between the Arabs and the Zionists, right? At the same place that he gave the lecture, not at the same time, but a little bit after, maybe the day after, I don't remember exactly when. But basically, the authorities said, you're the one who caused the riot. And more than a dozen people died from the Jewish side, from the Arab side. So it was a whole mobs just attacking each other. Many dozens were wounded, and around a dozen or so people were killed between the mob mentality. And so the British said, you're the one fomenting this hatred, this violence. And there was a petition to arrest him, but because he was so popular, because he was so famous, whatnot, they thought if we arrest him, it might actually, backlash. And so they decided to not arrest him. But multiple times, the same types of notions happen, and he's rising up in responsibility, in concern, and of course in rhetoric, because the situation is getting worse in this regard. And a time comes when the British basically have no option in their minds, obviously, than to say, he must be arrested because he's riling up, agitating. By the way, again, look at the sheer double standards, right? The one who is defending his land is called the terrorist, and the people you're bringing in for free, and the people that have no right to be there, they're the ones that are given the free pass. And by the way, I've gone over this, and you should study this. In this time frame, no Muslim terrorist group existed. There were multiple Zionist terrorist groups. Everybody knows this. Go read any Wikipedia entry, any basic book of history. Multiple Zionist terrorist groups were formed, targeting not just the Arabs, but the sheer arrogance, targeting the British, Who let them in? Why? You're not allowing more people in. You're only allowing 10,000, let's say, a month. No, we want 100,000. They began killing British officers. They bombed the King David Hotel, which was the base of where the British had their troops. One of the largest massacres of British troops, pre-modernity or pre-modern era, took place in the King David Hotel. Who did it? The person who eventually would become the Prime Minister of Israel. That's the person who was behind. Again, history is so weird. So instead of considering the Zionists to be terrorists, they say, okay, Al-Hajj Amin, you are too much of a troublemaker, then we have to arrest you. And subhanAllah, he then went into hiding. He actually, believe it or not, lived in Masjid Al-Aqsa complex in disguise for a few days, and then he made his way out so that he's not arrested. What's the benefit of getting arrested? So he made his way out, and he went to a number of other Arab countries. He went to Egypt, and then from there he went to Iraq. And along the way, he is talking to the rulers, the intellectuals, telling them you need to get involved. In fact, through the course of his life, he traveled to over 15 Muslim countries, meeting with the rulers, the kings, the princes, the presidents, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. He even went to the fledgling Emirate kingdom. There weren't kingdoms back then, but just the royal families of those places, right? Saudi Arabia. He's going to all of these lands. For what reason? Wanting the Muslims to do something. And as you can imagine, nothing actually happened. But he's trying to. The one person who's going and traveling there. And in every place he goes, obviously, the British don't want him to be there, so they put pressure on those regimes. SubhanAllah, nothing new, brothers and sisters. What you see now, it's nothing new. You have to understand. Such is the sunnat Allah fi khalqihi. And so, the poor guy has to keep on going from place to place until in Iraq also he's told, because the British had control over all of these places. So, where does he go? He decides to go to Europe. He decides to go to Europe. And again, not much different from now when all the Muslim countries have banned so many people. Where do they end up going? They go to the very countries that are forcing that ban on them, such is the irony of the real world situation. And he goes to first Italy, and from Italy, he then goes to Rome, Berlin. Why? Because this is still the beginnings of World War II. And on the one hand, you have the British, who are directly aiding and abetting who? The Zionists. And then you have the opponents of the British, and they happen to be the German Nazi Party. And we're going to have to come to this, because this is where it gets a bit awkward here. And he stayed in Berlin for 3 years. He stayed there for 3 years. And he met Hitler once in that time frame, and that is the picture that the Zionists always said that he was a Nazi. Remember, we're going to come back to this. He met Hitler once for less than an hour, and he asked Hitler to declare Arab lands to be safe, and then the Muslims should support. He did try to negotiate that if you declare that nothing is going to happen, then I promise you we will try our best to support, your cause. Hitler did not accept all of his demands, but Hitler did say that, obviously from his paradigm, you understand this as well, that he would put an end to Zionism. So you can keep your lands, I'm going to stop any migration, extra migration, you will have your land back here. So he remained, and I'm going to come back to this point, he remained in Germany until World War II finished. And when the French occupied Germany, liberated Germany, they arrested him. And then eventually they let him go because, and this is an important point here, he didn't do anything with the Nazi Party for him to be tried with anything, right? Again, he's just living there. We're going to come back to this point. So he then attempted to go to different countries, and as you're aware, obviously he would be given pressure to leave until finally he spent most of his time in Cairo in the 50s and the early 60s, between Cairo and Lebanon. And for that entire time frame, he never stopped attempting to bring political rights and stability to his people in Al-Aqsa, in Jerusalem, in Palestine. But unfortunately, this is a deeper topic, in the 50s and 60s, so guys, this is a very deep topic, and please understand this, and I'm just telling you how it was. The Islamic spirit about Al-Aqsa got lower and lower, and the secular nationalist spirit got higher. So, Al-Amin al-Husseini represents Islamic revivalism. And for many reasons, the 40s and 50s saw a decline of religiosity and a decline of Islamic revivalism across the Muslim world. And anybody who is above the age of 50, 60, you are aware of this from your own family and your stories that you've heard all across the Muslim world, right? So his version of revivalism wasn't popular because he remained firm as a Muslim, as an Islamic intellectual. And which version became the popular one? Secular pro-Palestinian movements, such as especially the PLO. The PLO, and again, I don't want to get involved between the Palestinians and whatnot, I'm not a Palestinian, but I'm just being academic and factual. The PLO is coming more from a nationalist perspective. And Islam is very much in the background. It's not in the forefront, right? So this is and of course PLO then leads to Al-Fatah. So now you have Fatah and you have the other organization called Hamas, right? I'm just being factual, guys, so don't take a clip and whatnot. I'm just being factual. Hamas, whatever you want to say about it, it represents the more revivalistic spirit. And Al-Fatah represents the more nationalistic, somewhat secular spirit, right? This is the PLO remnants became the Fatah. So in the 50s, Al-Amin al-Husseini sees this reality. What reality? Islamic revivalism on the decline. And it is sad to say that Arab leaders did not give him much respect after this. Not just the Arab leaders, but even amongst the masses. It was PLO, and if you do your history, there were at least 6 or 7 Palestinian organizations that are called terrorist organizations, that attempted to do attacks and whatnot at this time frame, because they felt this is Marxist. You had guerrilla Marxist type of warfare going on, because they were inspired by South American movements, they were inspired by African movements. Again, this is the time frame in the 60s and 70s. You have people like Che Guevara, and then who else? The other guy. Fidel Castro, sorry, that was the name, Fidel Castro, right? You have these people that actually did something, right? Fidel Castro seems to have won in his land of Cuba. So Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, they actually inspired movements around the world, Muslim and non-Muslim. I mean, Muslim technically. And so of those movements were movements that are Palestinian but nationalist, right? And so they have Marxist ideology. Some of them were atheist, many were Christian, so you have, religion is not something that is important, right? This is, and for the record, this only began to rise up in the late 80s. The late 80s, right? And the 90s, alhamdulillah, that you have an Islamic revivalist movement around the whole world here. So our person, Al-Hajj Amin, unfortunately, his influence dwindled, not because he changed his tone, but because the world wasn't ready for him. And he passed away in the late 70s, early 70s. He passed away and he was buried in Lebanon. His family attempted that he be buried in Masjid Al-Aqsa. They requested and petitioned, but Israel denied him that privilege. He never returned to Israel since the British attempted to arrest him. His whole life was in exile. He passed away in 1974. 1970, which is relatively recent, not that long ago. He passed away in 1974. But there's a lot of other information. I'm just going over what he did in the 50s and 60s. He formed organizations. He traveled the Muslim world. He attempted to bring about the beginnings of the OIC. The OIC, he was the one he actually attempted to bring something before that. It all fizzled out. He wasn't able to do much, but his legacy lives on. Now, I want to now get back to the controversial issue, because this, to me, it is imperative that we talk about this factually. The accusation that is made against him is that, number one, he was a Nazi, and number two, the most preposterous, and wallahi, it is downright evil what these liars, and they are liars, from the revisionist Zionist camp attempt to do. Because before I tell you the lie, understand, what do they want to do? They want to demonize Palestinians. They want to make them subhuman. They want people to lose all sympathy for Palestinians. How do they do this? By inventing lies, by portraying them as terrorists, by. So one of the lies that unfortunately has gained currency, even amongst some people that are supposed to be academically inclined, is the lie that Amin al-Husseini was the one who told Hitler to engage in the Holocaust. And you will find this online. You will find this amongst many academics as well, some pseudo-academics. Excuse me. You will find this amongst some pseudo-academics. However, there is not a shred of evidence that he actually did anything like this. And I'm going to come back to this point. So the lie is he was a senior member of the Nazi party. The lie is he was of the entourage of Hitler. And then the worst lie, the Palestinians caused the Holocaust. Wallahi, how nefarious. They're guilty. The Europeans are guilty. That race is guilty. And who do they accuse? Oh, it's the Palestinians who caused the Holocaust. You understand now why it's important to talk about this person? Because the justification, by the way, even if one person did this evil, that does not give you the right to do evil against everybody of the same skin color and ethnicity. That's the essence of bigotry and racism. Even if, but that is the notion that is being said here. So let us debunk this and let us clarify what was he doing in Nazi Germany, because he was there for 3 years. So, as for the claim that he was a member of the Zionist party or of the core of Hitler's entourage, there is no evidence whatsoever that he ever signed up to be a Nazi. There's no evidence whatsoever that he was close to Hitler. How could he be close when he met him once in 3.5 years for less than an hour? And he met him for what reason? To try to secure Arab freedom. So there is no evidence whatsoever. It is a blatant, lie. And then as for the claim that he helped orchestrate the Holocaust, once again, every serious neutral academic acknowledges there is not even a whiff of evidence for this. Absolutely nothing. It's a blatant lie that they want to just smear the Palestinians with. There is no, and again, we now know, everybody now knows the whole story of how it came about and who was in charge, and, was it Speer and Goerings and all of these guys? We all know them. They are. Nobody ever mentions that, Amin Hussein was a part of our secret meetings. He's just a foreigner living in Berlin. However, one thing that, yes, and this is where it comes a bit more awkward, he started being the Arab broadcaster for the German news agency. Because every country, even Voice of America, it has, I don't know, did Trump take the funding away? I don't know, but when I was growing up and throughout the 90s, Voice of America would be across the globe in 20 different languages, right? Every government has a branch that gives news according to its perspective. So because he's a senior Arab, fluent Arab, he did the job. He took the job of being the Arab broadcaster for the German radio. And obviously the German radio is under the Nazi party at that time. Okay, so that was his job, where he got money from for 3 years, that he's just reading the Arab news, the news in the Arabic language, right? That's what he did there. Now, some points to keep in mind. And I will be very honest here, because we don't have to defend every single decision he made, but we try our best to be fair. Point number one, he was in exile. Why did he end up in Germany? Because the British wanted to arrest him. Because every other country was forced to let him go. So let's be fair here. The one country that gave him an opportunity to come was Germany. What did you expect him to do? You're the ones calling him a terrorist when you're the ones creating the real terrorists over there. You're the ones calling a genuine freedom fighter, and without a doubt, according to any definition, he is a freedom fighter. Without a doubt, according to any definition, he wants liberty for his people. You're the ones who made life haram for him, so he had to go where he had to go. So the one place that welcomed him was Germany. So he went to Germany because that's where he was given the right to be in exile. Number two, there is no defense of Hitler. I've said this multiple times. Hitler was a very bad person, a very evil person, and I've said this multiple times. Muslims, we have to be careful. We study history. When Hitler was doing what he was doing, multiple Muslim countries protected the Jewish people of that time frame because it was very, very unethical and wrong. The Grand Mosque of Paris, its whole basement became a safe refuge for Jewish people. The Grand Mosque of Paris. In Bosnia, which had some Jewish people, the Muslim ruler said, no way. In other regions that had some ties with Germany, Tunisia, other places, said, we're not going to hand our Jewish people to you just so that you can kill them. This is dhulm. Families come and you're going to kill them. So we have to be careful here that whatever the Zionist entity does, we don't back project our anger to try to defend a person that is indefensible. So Hitler was evil, no question about that. But what I'm about to say is not a defense. In 1930 and 1940, people weren't aware of how evil he was. And this is factually correct. It's not a defense, but it is true. Winston Churchill, up until, I believe, 1940, praised Adolf Hitler. Winston Churchill, the prime minister. And he said, I met him, he's not that bad of a man as people say. I think he's a man who can honor his word. Like, he had some praise for him up until 1940. Here in our country, Joseph Kennedy, the father of John F. Kennedy, because JFK's family is the royal family of America, his father was one of the most powerful senators, and he was also the ambassador to England, John F. Kennedy's father. John F. Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, praises Hitler up until, I think, 1940-41 as well. Like, I think he's a man who's going to bring, whatever, I don't know the exact quote, but he didn't call him a demon. So I'm saying to the people that criticize Amin Husseini, if your own politicians couldn't see through Hitler, and they are politicians, you expect a person who's just a political activist, an ammi, a sheikh, you expect him to know this reality? This is a double standard here. So my point is, we don't know what Hajj Amin knew about Hitler. The claim that is given is that nobody knew the Holocaust was happening or how bad it was until the World War II was over. That's the claim they themselves say to exonerate themselves. Americans say this about themselves. Europeans say, British say, we didn't know how bad it was. Okay, your intelligence and your aerial didn't know, and you expect Amin Husseini to know? An average person. So a double standard is given here. We don't know how much he knew. This is the second point. And then the third point, there's no exoneration, but when you are forced into a corner, and when there's a war going on, and one side is massacring your people, and the other side says, we will protect your people, what choice did you want him to have? And honestly, it's a very difficult point. What choice did you want him to have when he is given the promise by Hitler himself that if Germany wins, then we will stop the Zionist project? Now, obviously, Amin Hussein did not know Hitler's doing more than just stopping the Zionist project. Hitler is exterminating the Jewish people of Germany. We don't know how much Amin knew or not. But what we know for certain, because that was a public meeting, the records are there, is that Hitler said to Amin Husseini that your people, if we win, you give us your verbal support. If we win, we promise we were not going to allow this immigration to continue, and you will have your land free and independent. So what did you want him to do? And you think this is unique to him? Nelson Mandela, there's an amazing interview, go watch it. Nelson Mandela, after all was said and done, and he visited America. What's that guy's name? Ted Koppel, one of the famous guys in, 2020, whatever it is, right? Ted Koppel thinks he got him in a corner. And he says, so in the 70s and 80s, what are your people, the ANC, they met with this guy and that guy. Even you, when you were released, you met with this dictator and that dictator. So he's trying to put him in a corner, right? And it's an amazing interview. This is a leader. I have to say, I admire Nelson Mandela, like a true leader. And it's something that we need to benefit from, the courage that he has. He literally became angry and frustrated at this arrogance of this interview. He said, when you guys were calling me terrorists, when you guys were considering me and my fight to free my people as terrorism, when I was in jail by your own decree, the only peoples that met with me are the ones you call terrorists. They're the ones that helped us, funded us, gave us aid. And now when everything is said and done, you want to take the accolades. You want to pretend you're the better party. You're the ones that called us terrorists, and you supported the apartheid regime against us. He literally flipped the script and completely silenced, the interviewer, right? Meaning, what did you want us to do? We were fighting for our freedoms, and instead of helping us, you jailed us, you tortured us, you considered us to be criminals. Now that it's all said and done, you think you're all clean and holy. No, you have no right to now come back and say, I met with so-and-so and so-and-so. Because those people were the only ones that were helping us to fight for freedom for our people. He literally did not mince his words and flip the script here. If this is Nelson Mandela, why should Amin al-Husseini be treated differently? You're the ones who called him, fighting for his people, a terrorist. You're the ones who supported the terrorists against him. You're the ones who wanted to imprison him. So the one place, the one superpower that gave him help, what did you want him to do? And again, hindsight's 2020. Without a doubt that Hitler was not a good person. And, it's in hindsight, we know that nobody should form alliances with him. But again, it's 1940. We don't know the future in this regard. So to conclude, we'll say that Al-Hajj Amin al-Husseini was without a doubt the primary figurehead, the spearhead of Islamic revival to free Masjid al-Aqsa from 1920 up until his death in 1974. Unfortunately, it was Allah's qadar that towards the end of his life, he really was not given the respect that he deserved. His lectures, his influence became much less, not because he changed his stances, but because it wasn't popular at that time to be an Islamic revivalist talking about Masjid al-Aqsa and whatnot. Yet his legacy remains, and he should be somebody that we look up to and respect and we make dua for. And without a doubt, he is free of the accusations that his enemies make. He was never a supporter of Nazi ideology. This is a lie. He was never a member of the party. This is a lie. And without a doubt, the biggest lie is that the Holocaust comes from them. This is a complete and blatant lie. If he made a judgment error, it is a judgment error that we understand even if we don't condone. We understand given the context, and we excuse for that. And I am certain if he understood the reality, and obviously hindsight is 2020, he would never have sided or at least been even partially in support of a person as evil as Hitler. But the lies that are said are worse in this regard. And with this we make dua for him and for all our brothers and sisters over there, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us to be able to contribute to the revival of the ummah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.